Good morning, everybody. Are you happy to be here this morning? Are you thankful for the cross of Jesus Christ this morning? I hope that you are, because without the cross of Jesus Christ, we have, as we just sang, we would have no victory. We would have no hope. We would have no expectations beyond this world. And this world without the cross, giving it perspective, this world is a miserable place. Now you might think, but the people, I know so many lovely and wonderful people are thankful for the cross. Without the cross, we are of all men most miserable, to quote the apostle in 1 Corinthians 15. So I'm thankful for the cross at all times, but especially on particular occasions when I need to pause in moments of grief and be thankful for something greater than this life. The sermon this morning is a little bit different than what was planned. I said last week the sermon would be entitled, Saved by What? And I plan on preaching that instead next week, God willing. But instead we have a different sermon. Now I want to say this at the outset. It was mentioned in the announcements. We have several members who are dealing with the loss of loved ones. Mothers and fathers and grandfathers and uncles and friends and loved ones. People have died in the very recent past few days and weeks. And people are still grieving and people are still mourning. I want everybody to know, everybody who is going through something like that, your church family loves you and is grieving with you and is here for you in whatever and however way we can be. It is not always the case when someone dies that you rip up the sermon and preach another one. This is the third time I've done it. Out of all the years that I've been here, Amy Fairchild was one, Eddie Arnold was one, and now this morning because of John Ward's passing a couple of days ago. But that doesn't diminish the importance or how much care we have for everyone else who has lost a loved one. So I just want to make that clear. I'm sure everyone already knows that, but just to put that on record. It's only every now and then especially when it's a death that it seems like it's going to touch the hearts of every person who worships here. That it just feels like a good use of pulpit time to pause and reflect on that in a sermon. But having said that, let's reset. It is said that at the end of his life, when John's speech was too feeble to be heard by people too far away, and when John's body was too frail to be able to go wherever he wanted and do whatever he wanted, that the apostle would be carried by his disciples and loved ones from congregation to congregation to preach to those people who loved him so much, who had read his inspired writings and who had sat at his feet many times to hear him. But age and worldly conditions wear us down, and so John had to be carried to various churches toward the end of the first century. And as he would be laid down before them, and he could speak only barely above a whisper. And so the church would gather close to him and stoop near him for him to speak his sermon, which would encompass only 5 words. Little children, love one another. Those words being a paraphrase of something that the man himself wrote, the reading we just had, 1 John 4:11. Beloved, if God so loved us, so we ought to love one another. Now that's John's sermon. It carries with it 1,000 connotations, 1,000 subpoints that you can draw from it. Just about every single word in that verse you can make a whole sermon out of. Every implied thought that is built into that statement has its own series of sermons you can pull out of it. There's a lot to be said from John's sermon here. But that is not the sermon I'm going to share with you this morning. There's another John sermon that I want you to hear. Our beloved John Ward passed away Friday evening at about 8 o'clock. Friday afternoon at about 2 o'clock, I stood at his side and stooped very low to be able to hear him. And even then, there was a lot that he said I couldn't quite make out because of the deterioration of his physical body. He wasn't able to speak very loudly and very clearly. And so I was struggling to make out everything he was saying, but I did make out quite a bit. He shared some things with me. But I'm not telling you that as if to say he and I had some secret special thing we shared. No, no, no. What he said to me, he specifically wanted me to say to you. So while it's a little unorthodox, it's not completely out of the ordinary for me to take someone else's sermon and preach it to you. And that's what I'm going to do this morning. This sermon is not my sermon. I just kind of organized it for him. This sermon is John's sermon. He had some things he wanted you to know. Now there's some other things we're not going to talk about this morning that I will share tomorrow here at the memorial service for him. But in terms of a sermon, he had 3 things he wanted you to understand. 3 things he wants you to hear that come from Scripture too. First thing is this. If you can attend, do it. Let me put it in his words. He said, quote, "It was difficult to be at worship, so don't make excuses." You might roll out of bed. You might roll over and look at your alarm clock on a Sunday morning and see that it's 9:12. Oh, you missed Bible class. By the time you get here, it'll be 9:45, and you'll be just walking in time for worship. So just skip the whole thing. Be here. You would rather be on the lake. Be here. You might have had a hard week, and you just want to take a day. Be here. You might have a small ache or a small pain. You might have some discomfort, real or imaginary. If you can be here, be here. Because there were some people for whom it was excruciating to be here. But they loved here and the people here so much that they wanted to be here enough to grin and bear it. And speaking of, we saw John here Sundays and Wednesdays. Did we ever see him frown when he was here? Did you ever hear him utter a cross word? Did you ever see him display a sour disposition? Did he ever complain about his lot in life? No. And in fact, if you asked him about his lot in life, he would simply rattle off all the blessings that he had been given in this life, and without a word for complaint. It was hard. It hurt to be here, but he wanted to be here because he loved being here. Let me read for you from the other John, 1 John 3:14. He says, "We know we have passed from death unto life because we love the brethren." John Ward loved you. So much so that he looked forward to seeing you on Sundays, and he missed you when you were not here. And on Wednesday nights, and he missed you when you were not here. Because he loved the brethren. He loved being around you. He loved singing beside you. He loved communing with you. This wasn't just a social gathering for him. He appreciated worship and the joy that comes with worshiping our shared King as a family. So if you can attend, do it. You have no excuses. Number 2, if you cannot serve God as you once did, serve Him as you can now. Because we live in a fallen world where disease and hardships reign and will take over our body and cripple our wills and our abilities to do what we would have us do. The things we would want to do. Our spirit be willing, but our flesh be weak. And so it would be very easy to say, I look back on what I used to be able to accomplish as a Christian. All the things that I used to be able to do, and I can't do them anymore because X, Y, Z. It's not because I don't want to. It's not because I don't have the desire to, or because I don't want to serve God anymore. No, I still want to, but I can't do what I used to be able to do. The temptation is to follow that up by saying, so I'll do nothing. I'll just sit and stew in resentment and bitterness and in frustration over the limitations of my body and all that this fallen world has done to my body. Listen to John Ward's words. He said, how to serve God with ALS. You can't in body, so you have to in spirit. See, it's not denial. He understood the limitations that had been imposed on him. Limitations and restrictions that he would not have wanted for himself. That he would have preferred not to have to endure, so that he could continue being a servant in the kingdom, doing and doing and doing all that he did previously. But he can't do them anymore. So what does he do? If you can't serve God in body, how can you serve God? In spirit. He adapted. He improvised. He did his best with what he had to work with. And in so doing, he did not let the devil win. Because the devil, the prince of this fallen world, for whom we credit every disease, including death itself, would use those things against us to prevent us from serving God, and does succeed in preventing us from serving God as we used to do. But the devil can't touch your will. He cannot touch your spirit. You keep those in the covenant of God, and you serve him as much as you can serve him, and you will defeat the devil. Listen to John the Apostle again, 1 John 3:20. If our heart condemn us, God is greater than our heart and knows all things. Beloved, if our heart does not condemn us, then we have confidence toward God. What he's saying there, just to simplify it, is there are some people who worry when they look back on their lives. They think, I don't know if I did enough. I wish I could have done more. I wish in my heart that I had been more zealous and more fervent in my service. I wish when I could do it over again that I would have done this more and that more and this more and that more. Well, you can't go back in time. You cannot undo what you've done. You've done what you've done. You're faithful as much faithful as you can be now, and all of us could go back and say, I wish I had turned right instead of left there. I wish I had done this instead of that there. All of us can look and say, in my heart, I wish I had done more. Okay, God is greater than that heart of yours. Because that heart of yours full of anxiety and worry and feeling like you didn't accomplish enough, none of us are ever going to accomplish enough to satisfy what Jesus did for us. That's not on the table. God is greater than your heart. And if your heart doesn't condemn you, if you look back on your life and you say, I know, of course I wasn't perfect, but I did as much as I could do, then rejoice in the confidence of God that you have. We rejoice with you. John was physically unable to do, our John, as much as he used to be able to do. But he didn't quit. He did what he could do. That's all any of us can do. So if you can't serve God as you once did, okay. Serve God as you can now. Finally, I'm almost done. Death is not the end. These are his words. It's been hard for a little while, but there is hope in Jesus. Not all of us are going to be able to know when, as the world puts it, the end is right around the corner. All of us, mature enough, I think, are cognizant of the fact that death lingers over all of us, hangs there like an albatross, like the proverbial, cartoon piano over our head just waiting to fall. It's going to happen to everybody eventually in some way. We all know that, but we don't know when. Some of us deal with hardships that allow us to be aware that the end is almost, that the end is near, that it's drawing close. You may not know the exact moment when your soul will escape the grasp of its body, but you can sometimes know it's nearing it. It's nearing what, again, we call the end. But to a Christian, there is no end. A Christian appreciates that the soul that his or her body houses, that soul is eternal. It had a starting point, but it has no ending point. It shall ever exist in one form or another, in one eternal place or another. It shall ever be. And a Christian appreciates that with hope, because that soul has been bought and is now owned by Jesus Christ. And so while this body may decay and deteriorate and die, the essence of who we are shall ever be. Now listen to what your master says, as recorded by John the Apostle. John 11:25 and 26. Jesus said to her, standing outside the grave of Lazarus, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believes in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? Jesus asked. Do you believe this? I asked. Now, Jesus said those words standing in front of the grave of a man who was dead. And yet, he knew that, and yet he still said, and he that believes in me, as Lazarus did, and lives as Lazarus did while he was alive, shall never die. And yet Lazarus is dead. Jesus himself uttered those words about 20 verses before this to his disciples. Lazarus is dead. And yet he still says, he that believes in me, even if he's alive, he'll never die. Yet Lazarus is dead. John Ward believed in Jesus. In his life, he believed Jesus. And yet he is dead. Yet the Master says he shall never die. He's told you what he means. I am the resurrection and the life. And he that believes in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. Do you believe that? We have a dearly departed friend who believed that. Do you think we're burying John Ward tomorrow? His body goes in the grave. His mind rests. His soul enjoys paradise. Until the day comes when the Master descends with a shout and says to all graves, as he says to Lazarus, come forth. And then we shall ever live with him. It's a sermon, so you have to have an invitation. This is John's invitation. These are his words. The most important thing is not to mourn me, but to make sure you're right with Jesus. I think he'll forgive us for mourning him. We have done that. We are doing that. We will do that tomorrow and beyond. But what a hollow, worthless gesture our mourning would be if we did so without a good relationship with Jesus Christ, without being sin-washed by the blood of Jesus Christ. Because all we'd be able to do is mourn the past. For a Christian, for a saved, faithful child of God, we mourn the past and we look forward to the future. We look forward, not just with perspective looking forward, but we have eager anticipation look forward to the day when we will be reunited with all of our departed loved ones. And we will see the Lord in the flesh and be as he is, 1 John 3. So if you are here this morning and you're not a Christian, why are you not a Christian? Because it is only in Jesus Christ that you have hope beyond the grave. With or without Jesus Christ, barring his second coming in our lifetime, the grave is waiting for all of us. All of us will be grasped by it. And without Jesus Christ, none of us will be able to escape it. But through him, we will rise and vanquish death forevermore. So if you are not a child of God, why not obey the gospel? John Ward's favorite text, Romans 6, 3 and 4. Bury your sins in the watery grave and rise to walk in newness of life. If you have not done that, this is your opportunity. This is your invitation to do that. If you have not been faithful, get right with the Lord before it is too late. If you have a need, make it known right now. Come as we stand and sing.